The South Australian state budget has been handed down and Treasurer Rob Lucas has forecast surprise surpluses. That's despite serious hits to the state's revenue. Joining me live now for more is Daniel Wills, the state political editor at the Adelaide Advertiser. Dan, thanks for your time today. I know the budget lockup has just concluded, so you've only just gotten back out into the real world. We know that South Australia has suffered a big GST hit, but the state government is still confident of surpluses each year. So how are they doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it came as quite a shock. We carried the story today that they would be reporting these surprise surpluses across 4 years. I mean, obviously that's hypothetical until they are achieved, but they're quite confident it can be done. For a small state like South Australia, the GST really is a very substantial input to the budget. The federal grants and other money sent to South Australia is more than half of the money that the state budget receives each year. To maintain that balance, despite losing $500 million in this coming 12 months alone, there's been a few moves to increase revenue, mostly through crackdowns on people and businesses that have been avoiding paying their taxes, through land tax, creative company structures to try and avoid land tax, and also payrolls to make sure that the state is getting every dollar that it's owed. There's also some new savings measures. There's about $400 million baked into the budget over the next 4 years, in addition to pre-existing savings measures of about $800 million that were announced last year. So the departments are all going to have to sort of cut their cloth to try and meet those savings. And also the solid waste levy, which is the amount of money that's charged to basically take rubbish to the dump, is also increasing. And there's a few other bits and pieces here and there, which has the government hopeful of very slender, even in their own language they say small surpluses over the next 4 years. And another thing that they've pointed out today, they've just offered a new pay deal to the teachers who've rejected that. Is that if any of these public sector wage deals do blow out, that really could affect the bottom line over those next 4 years.
So Dan, as is usually the case with these types of budgets, we got a bit of a heads up on a few of the cuts that the government was already announcing. Were there any big surprises in regards to any other cuts today?
Well, in a way, it is surprising how gently they've gone. As I say, there's $400 million to be sliced out of the budget over 4 years. That's fairly nondescript about where that's coming from. The departments are being left quite a bit of discretion about how they find it. And even in terms of the public service, South Australia has about 85,000 full-time equivalent public servants. That's about 100,000 people in headcount. They're only suffering a relatively small trim over the period. So it's been a lot of cost increases, both through fees and charges, but also through compliance. Other measures that they're taking to try and close those gaps. And I might say they've also been assisted by the federal government, which has really pumped in quite a lot of infrastructure money to South Australia and other specific purpose payments for things like hospitals that have just given them that bit more headroom as they try and keep that budget balanced.
Let's talk a little bit more about that infrastructure, because there's a record spend announced within this budget. What is the pledge and where are those funds going to go?
Well, the big number that they're quoting is $11.9 billion over the budget period, in a budget that's spends about $20 billion on everything each year, so that's a large amount of money. A lot of that is coming from a very substantial growth in the state debt. So currently it's about $13 billion, heading north of $20 billion, towards $21 billion by the end of the period. And the government is very relaxed about that. They say they can borrow at 1.66%. On their debt, which any household would love to get. In South Australia, debt, your viewers might remember the collapse of the State Bank really did put South Australia in quite a hole. It's a state that's had a bit of a scepticism about debt. The new Liberal government is quite happy to let that run. And they're also jumping, in terms of infrastructure, onto the new branding that the Prime Minister is using around congestion-busting infrastructure. In South Australia, the former Labor government built a new hospital, a new oval, new road and rail, and that became a really big brand strength for them. And I think the state Liberals are really trying to work off that foundation that Scott Morrison has built around congestion-busting infrastructure. South Road, which is our main freeway in Adelaide, there's some money for that. That could be upwards of somewhere between $5 and $10 billion once the full costings are in. That will be the single biggest infrastructure project South Australia has ever undertaken. And you've got a Liberal government now who, as I say, are really trying to take that mantle of being the infrastructure party off of Labor.
As well as the State Bank, I guess, being a defining moment in South Australia's history, Dan, we also saw a few years ago the huge issue of Holden's closure, and since then jobs have been a massive talking point in the state. So was there much of an outlook on that front in regards to jobs?
The budget is actually very modest in terms of its expectation for jobs in South Australia over the next 4 years. So the final year of the Labor government, there was a 2.2% increase in the jobs rate. This budget is now projecting 1% over each year over the next 4 years. So the new state government says they'd like to do better than that, but at the moment, Treasury and the budget papers say that they're going to struggle to really lift the jobs growth rate. We do, of course, have the promise of the shipbuilding program coming into effect towards the end of that sort of 4-year budget period. So there's great hope that offshore patrol vessels, frigates and submarines will really, along with the space industry, I might say, supercharge employment growth in South Australia in the medium term.
Yeah, definitely two big sectors for South Australia. And just finally, Dan, how's this budget going to be received politically? We know that we've got the budget reply speech from the opposition leader on Thursday. Is there much in it that he can take aim at?
Well, it is hard for them to criticise the infrastructure, I think. I mean, that's something, as I say, that South Australian Labor has really supported over a long period of time. They probably will attempt to have a go at the debt, but the party that has carried fairly large debts, not this big, but fairly large debts, might find that a difficult ground to argue from. So, yeah, it is hard to see immediately where they'll go. I mean, this isn't the Campbell-Newman type of Liberal government that we have here in South Australia. They've tried to be a steady hand on the tiller, to not pick too many fights, and to really sail over calm waters rather than do it all in sort of one big hit, create lots of enemies, and then find it hard to sustain re-election in 4 years' time.
OK, well, we'll have to wait and see, Dan. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Pleasure.
And we're going to get a little bit more on that state budget in South Australia now. We're live to Adelaide, where the Treasurer, Rob Lucas, is handing down the budget to Parliament.
The government's financial performance or its contractual arrangements for leases. Mr Speaker, even with these challenging financial circumstances, this budget includes a responsible package of $2.2 billion of new initiatives over 4 years, as well as a massive $11.9 billion total government investing program. Some of the key features of this budget includes a housing sector stimulus package, commencing construction of the new Women's and Children's Hospital, a major road safety package, projects to be funded as part of the 10-year Adelaide City Deal Agreement, works to protect and save coastal areas such as West Beach, industry sector support from the Economic and Business Growth Fund, a racing industry support package, significantly increased investment in education, including a more than $80 million investment to deliver high-speed internet to every government school student by the middle of 2020, additional resources for health, child protection and TAFE SA, and commencement of early works for the North-South Corridor project.
That is the South Australian Treasurer, Rob Lucas, handing down the state budget to Parliament.